traditionally law is one of the few, it's a calling. And
Yeah.
so if we're there as counselors, AI will never commoditize that legal counsel.
Yeah.
And we're all for anything that's going to help our clients and help
Yeah.
us be more efficient.
Lawyers and attorneys. If you're running a business, start a business, you gotta deal with them on some level. And a lot of times it's a negative experience. Either it's they charge too much or you're dealing with them because a contract went sideways and you're in a lawsuit, Now, I don't want that to dissuade you because today's guest, Jeshua Lauka, who's an attorney in West Michigan, he is on this podcast because he's talking about all of the work he's done with purpose-driven, faith-driven entrepreneurs. And I love my conversation with Jeshua because it really showed a transformation and insight to someone that you thought you knew what he was like and who he was and where he came from, but it was totally opposite. I'm Mike Sudik. This is Faith and Tech. Jeshua, thanks for coming on the show.
Very glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Yeah. So you are kind of the man behind the curtain on a lot of startups and companies here in West Michigan. I know you do a lot of work with like tech companies. You do a lot of work with faith-driven companies, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about what's behind the highlight reel for some of these companies. Like what's going on. As much as you can share within attorney-client privilege. So,
really appreciate that. Yeah. The practice of law is never boring, and walking alongside people who are building things, the road of uncertainty, it's a great thing to walk alongside and help people with. They don't know. We don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about some of the companies that you work with. I know you work with a lot of early stage companies. Is a big part of your work. And tell me a little bit about what are some of the things as a company's getting started that are, things that they don't even know that they don't know.
Yeah.
That's I know that, in my talks with you, it's like that's a lot of the work that you're doing. You're not just providing basic legal services, but you're like advising some of these companies in certain ways and how to set things up to avoid failure, but also to like scale, as they're growing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's ideal when we are acting on our clients' behalf to not just fight fires, to be reactive, to put things out, but when we're being proactive and keeping them out of things that they could have avoided. And so that's a huge part of it. And really, my representation, yes, it's early stage companies, helping them start, whether or not they're bootstrapped or they're taking outside capital. And, depending on whether or not they're bootstrapping and have outside capital, also creates a host of other issues that we need to help navigate them through. But then, just more mature companies, entrepreneurs who have got portfolios of companies, or maybe it's real estate ventures. They've got their hands on lots of different things. So the more complexity, the more attention to keeping them on the right path. But from the start of the things that a founder just doesn't know that we can help them identify they should know, it's liability. It's how do we keep them out of trouble. So and those are the things that the way that I identify it is a couple of different types of liabilities to look at. Number one, making sure that your structure is set up so properly to limit your personal liability. That's it's not just as easy as clicking a button and filing something on Lara, which is a lot of things that people who are bootstrapping do to avoid legal fees, but it's making sure the entities are set up properly, and then making sure your internal contracts are in place. Contracts are just risk allocation. How do I allocate risk away from myself appropriately and to the other party and to protect myself? So those contracts with your team members, that can look a whole bunch of different ways, depending if you've got a founding team that you need to offer equity to, or just to make sure that you're protecting what you're building, confidentially, solicitation provisions, all the IP, all of that stuff, those internal contracts, and then making sure your external contracts, your terms and conditions, and all of that protects your business as you grow. So that, again, not putting out fires, being proactive.
Yeah. And I assume like when you're working with companies, you're kind of sorting out a mess that they're bringing you. Like, do you hear that a lot where you have companies that are avoiding working with someone like yourself or saying, we're just kind of winging it, whether it's templated contracts or agreements or whatever, like, what are the common areas where they're opening themselves up to risk or?
Well, now you're kind of highlighting on kind of where we are in this generation of generative AI and
Yeah.
all the things that people try and do themselves through just putting through, Chat GPT or something else.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. And one of the things that it's always a little bit complex when we're asked to look at things that people pulled from the web and then just hey, could you please spot check and see what I did right or wrong and all. And it's actually much more efficient if we're involved on the front end to be proactive. And keeping in mind that there are law firms that are used to working with early stage companies are usually trying to be mindful, unless they're bigger companies and they know that they are going to put a whole suite of documents together, and maybe an investor is going to actually foot the legal bill there. So, but for us, we're a boutique business law firm, and we are there trying to be very mindful. Any stage of the company, you're trying to be mindful and cost effective. So, but having that conversation on the onset of, really, it's more cost effective if you let us help you first before you jump into the things and put them out and let legal Zoom and the internet and ChatGPT be your lawyer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We see that in the technology space where it's like someone brings you something that's half baked and it's like, hey, can you fix this technical solution? It's like, well, it's actually a little easier if we start from scratch.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we totally understand that. Yeah. So it's interesting you talk about like generative AI and like some of those things like that's not to say that those things aren't helpful, right? So where does that go? Because a lot of the work that you're doing is with companies that are growing and they have either their legal needs are changing because they're growing or they're like getting in different markets or taking on investors. I know that's something that you specialize in is the complexity. But that said, where does technology fit in that whole space?
It's a huge benefit. It's an efficiency, and I think for our clients who are really well versed in it, they understand that it's a tool, and it creates efficiency. So, for an example, for a client of mine who is entering into an agreement, and they will run the contract that they've been received. It's kind of an adhesion contract, meaning the other side has outsized bargaining power. So it's kind of a take it or leave it type. But the client wants to know, what am I stepping into? And if they run it through ChatGPT or whatever tool they're using, and they'll see, well, this says I should look out for this, this, and this, and this. And they'll send it to me to say, hey, this is what my AI search engine says. What do you think? And so what that does is it just creates an efficiency. I can, so it's a cost saving. It's being more cost effective for the client.
Yeah.
And what that does for us as lawyers is it really allows us, it's a tool to allow us to do what we're good at.
Yeah.
AI will never replace the judgment and the actual counsel that, traditionally law is one of the few, it's a calling. And so if we're there as counselors, it's, AI will never commoditize that legal counsel.
Yeah.
And so it's there as a tool, and we're all for anything that's going to help our clients and help us be more efficient.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've had conversations with people that are in the healthcare space, and they talk about AI usage, and they're saying, AI is basically a tower of knowledge, which it's, so in healthcare, you have knowledge that you need for doing treatments or for diagnosing something. But that counsel or that diagnosis or something is a judgment call in some ways. So you can, get leverage from the tower of knowledge, which is, standard, language or whatever you have. But that counsel thing is a unique piece, which is, tell me a little bit about that. That's a lot of what you do, right? People are coming to you that need the counsel. Yeah, they need the contracts. Yeah, they need review, all that stuff, but they need that counsel. And tell me a little bit about, just a little bit about some of that you're doing for companies, because what are some things that you're seeing, like common trends, with companies that maybe mistakes to avoid, right? Like, or common stories where they went down this path and then they like, oh, I needed Jeshua to come in and help us sort this thing out,
Yes, yeah. Most of my time these days is spent essentially serving as that advisor role, and so some might call it a fractional general counsel. it's the companies that have a lot of ongoing advisor needs. They don't have an in-house counsel, so it's there that they're spending time with me, and they're allowing me to sit with them, and as they talk through what their day-to-day experiences are, I'm able to kind of pick that out an issue spot and tell them where we should pivot and where we should look for. And that does depend on the stage that they're in. So, for instance, it might be an early stage company that's considering bootstrapping and considering entity choice. Well, they're in the founders that I really enjoy working with are those that they're purpose driven, they're faith driven, they're about something bigger than themselves that's motivating them, not just making a profit. And so when they look at that in that lens and say, gee, it really can end up looking very differently. Ultimately, the entity they create from an LLC to an L3C, a low profit limited liability company, to maybe even a nonprofit corporate. Who knows what that looks like, or any variation. So the advice is just where do they find themselves and what do they need now? Are they looking to hire a key employee? Well, if they're looking to hire a key employee, where's that key employee coming from?
Yeah.
If they're coming from some place that might have their own contractual obligations to that former company, what could they be stepping into? What do they need to think about and moving forward? What, especially with their growth, what are they missing that are processes that actually need to be in place so that they don't need to have to keep on coming back to me to generate documents. It's we're creating processes and templates that they'll come in, and if they need me to either do a final review or tweak something, but we're setting them up for the future to scale.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's like the counsel piece, right?
Yes.
That's like you're actually advising at that point. When did you always work with early stage companies? Tell me about your background.
Say that again?
Did you always work with early stage companies like that? Or was that something that you fell into because you enjoyed it? Like, tell me a little bit about your journey to that.
Gee, how far back do you want to go? It's the I started my practice in 2008, and in 2008 there was not a whole lot of transaction work going on. So it was I'm going to start out doing corporate transactions, and there wasn't any of that. And so I began my career doing litigation. So that was the type of work when everybody had stepped into it, into problems and needed the fires to put out. And so that was a lot of my practice for the early ages of my career. So it's been, in a couple of days, it'll be 17 years that I've been practicing law. So going into my 18th year, and it's transformed over time, partly because of my move to the Grand Rapids area 13 going on 14 years ago, working with the firm that I'm at now with the vision of taking over clients of the founding partner of my firm, who's a corporate transaction attorney. So that was the path, and it's been a gradual path, but I really enjoyed the part of my career of being in court and advocating for clients, having a holistic view of what could go wrong and issue spotting and how to really speak into a client and offer them wisdom about the various outcomes of what could happen if they chose various different paths.
Yeah. And what those, like, so you go back to like 2008, great financial crisis. In that 17-year span to today, your work migrating more towards like some of these startup, what has changed in that area when it comes to like funding to paths to specifically like tech kind of startup type companies, from the legal side? What are you seeing? Like, is there a shift more to bootstrapping? You get a lot of talk around kind of family offices getting into some of that investing. There's been a lot of PE activity, private equity activity. Like, what are some of those trends that you're seeing? Like, not necessarily all the way back 17 years, but now more recent. What are the trends going in that space?
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it ties into the faith-driven movement as well. West Michigan particularly is a unique culture, and it's not Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Part of that, the risk tolerance of our culture here would really lend against investing in early stage companies for a lot. And so, but what we see particularly some of the exited founders who've gone there, done the thing, and they're on the other side of it. They've had their liquidity event, and they're looking back, I think, on legacy now, and they're thinking back on what really motivates me now, and it's purpose. And so investing, and so when we see where that investment comes with, at least locally, it comes with offering a whole lot more than just capital. It's time, it's mentoring, it's resources, it's introductions, and so I think that the type of outside capital, the family offices, the angel investors that we see locally here, they're very purpose driven, and there's some pretty exciting movements going on. One of them being the Thrive and Prosper movement that's really targeted towards the 49507 zip code, where we've got the unfortunate most inequality as far as lifestyle in the Greater Grand Rapids area. But there's a lot of good going on.
What is that? What are they doing? What is that? I'm not familiar with that one.
So Thrive and Prosper. So particularly working in the 49507, really with the Grand Rapids Community Center for Transformation. Justin Bean leads up that, and then one of the key stakeholders also Continuum Ventures as well, looking to partner with a lot of the local community stakeholders and nonprofit, the church, the faith-based ministries, the other entrepreneurial organizations that specifically work in the 49507, where historically there's the most inequality, the most at-risk populations, to try and build equity, to try and really work with that startup community that might, the minority startup community that traditionally has the most barriers to capital, most barriers to thriving.
Right.
So Thrive and Prosper, simply trying to put together local stakeholders who are willing to invest relationally time, our experience. And so you see there's a lot of good going on in that community.
Yeah, that's really cool. So is that driven primarily by just private donors, or is it exited founders that are saying we want to get back to that? Like, what is it's obviously purpose driven individuals that are entrepreneurs or people that have capital, but like what's driving that, from an investment standpoint, but also from like the actual people that are actually operating it, right?
Yeah. So I think in a broad perspective, it's looking at a segment of West Michigan, the Greater Grand Rapids area, when we get so many accolades nationally. I mean, I think LinkedIn named us the #1 up and coming city in the U.S. not too long ago. You hear the best places to live, and that segment of Greater Grand Rapids 495 is just disparately not there.
Yeah.
And
so they're not part of that. Like you have all this great stuff that's going on, and it's like they're not really partaking or benefiting from it even.
Yeah, and so part of that is people who have social capital, recognizing that people in that demographic, in that zip code particularly, they don't have a voice that's commensurate to the Greater Grand Rapids area, and so trying to enter into relationships, not just one-way relationship, but relationships to help that thrive.
Yeah, that's really cool. What have they seen for outcomes in that? Because West Michigan is an interesting market, and I think that's why I love your perspective, because you've worked with so many of these companies from all shapes, sizes, stages, what have you. but there's kind of a emphasis on we want to be Silicon Valley for a little while there.
Yeah, right.
And they realize, oh no, we don't have the risk tolerance for that. We don't have a culture that's aligned with that. And now I feel like you've seen a pivot to a little different model. I'm not exactly sure where it all stands right now, but it seems like it's shifting to a more not as high risk, but also a lot of individuals, not necessarily big VC type firms, but you're seeing some of these exited founders, and you're seeing some of this stuff that is a little different than saying, hey, we're going to try to force this model of Silicon Valley or whatever into West Michigan. It's like, nah, it doesn't work that way,
Yeah, and I think part of that is just a recognition of let's be authentically who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And who does that attract, and who does that resonate? Who wants to participate in making our community prosper, and particularly with the startup community, with the business, and those who traditionally have barriers to prospering. So it's really taking. So you go back to what outcomes and measurements, and the great thing that Thrive and Prosper is doing. They have I think probably quarterly, maybe it might be more than that, meetings of the stakeholders where they measure those outcomes of here is what we are producing that's good. How many relationships, how many connections, how many new connections have been made. And I'm a big proponent of the word proximity always comes in mind, being proximate to those who have different lived experiences than us, who might view the world different than us. And because it's comfortable to be around the people that act like it's comfortable. We like comfort, but getting outside of that is where true change, transformation can happen. And so you're seeing those connections happen, relationships and opportunities develop that never would have been there.
Yeah, I think it's creating space for serendipitous conversations to occur, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's one thing I love about you. You are a great connector in West Michigan, but partly it's because you have all the unique, experiences with different companies you're working with, different organizations. You're saying you're kind of helping connect the dots, and I think that's such a vital piece. It is kind of hard to do well, in the sense of connecting people that you want to have diversity from a standpoint of connecting people that would have not normally gotten connected, but at the same time there's a value in connecting groups that can help one another. Meaning, you want people that are at a certain stage of thinking about their company, and then people that are at a certain stage of like having money to invest or something like that. That I think is important to have high value connections. Does that make sense? Like maybe
Yes.
I'm being unclear there, but
no, yeah. I think you hit it home with the last of what you said. High value connections. I think of high leverage relationships.
Yeah.
That make sense, and they just provide the most impact.
Yeah.
By connecting. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 now is 10, or it compounds.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily, that's not a dollar amount necessarily when it says high value, which I'm not saying that you're saying that. I think is that, you talk about the Thrive project, and you're saying, well, if you have someone that has capital, has a desire to invest in this area or this group of people, and then the highest value connection for that person would be to find someone in that area that has an idea or has some sort of connections inside there to say, let's connect. It's not necessarily a dollar aspect. It's just hey, what do you care about? What do you want to drive forward? And then you find people that are similar alignment in that.
Yes.
That's where I get hung up sometimes on some of these, these initiatives that you bring a lot of people in. You have these like pitch ideas or pitch competitions that are throwing out all these ideas against the wall, and they're offering like a little, thing you can win. It's like, that's okay, but it's almost it's too broad,
Yes.
right? So that's a balance, and but you can dilute that meeting and that kind of networking, whatever that is, if you're not doing it right with a common kind of goal. I feel like I'm being a little not being clear in what I'm saying, but I think you grasp what I'm saying.
I am grasping what you're saying.
Yeah.
I completely get it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see West Michigan kind of iterate on that over the last, I think 2008, but my involvement was probably more like 2010, 10 to 12ish, last like 15 years, kind of getting involved in more of that space, and then seeing them kind of tinker with these ideas. And I think it really is iterating towards what things align with our culture that already exists,
Yeah.
which I think is really important. And I think it's interesting because it kind of brings back to what you're saying about your work with companies that are purpose aligned, that you're saying, how do we align what the objectives, what the legal structure, all these things are aligned with these purpose-driven founder, and I think it's important for any organization to do that, and now it's cool to see all these initiatives that are trying to like cultivate the business culture in West Michigan, kind of iterate towards that and saying, oh, this is actually what fits in the already existing culture. We're not trying to force a new culture into West Michigan.
Yes.
That's where you're going to get the most success,
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in those who are looking to be very overt about that and attract people who that resonates with, it's kind of like, come participate with our culture if this rings true to you, because not everybody's Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley doesn't appeal to everybody.
Yeah. And you're always going to have some variations inside of that.
Yeah.
But writ large, you're going to have the main thing. You still got to resonate with the culture that exists, because it's like, you still want to have the big bets. You still want to have some,
Yes.
some of that. But, I think that's really neat. I think it's exciting times in West Michigan, especially like in the tech space. Tech space, the faith-driven kind of entrepreneur space. That I know you work with a local chapter here to cultivate that community. I think that's awesome. I think there's just so many things that are happening in that regard in West Michigan.
Yeah, and it kind of mirrors what's going on globally, really.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting.
Yeah. So take me back a little bit to your pre-law days, Jeshua. You shared a little bit of that at a recent event. I guess it probably wasn't so recent. I think it was a few years ago now at the Failure Lab.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually in the context of, if I talk about my why, my purpose of, why it's the why go to law school, all of that, and part of it is simply there was a transforming moment in my life.
Yeah.
And it was at a point where I encountered Jesus Christ, and he radically changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
Growing up in a home that was, parents were high school dropouts, dad was never around, drug addiction, alcoholism on one side of the family, chaos, dysfunction. And there was no way out visibly from my perspective back then.
Yeah.
And when I was 14, my mom really had no safety net. She had no community. She didn't know what to do, and things were so chaotic in our house. And she just said, I'm going to go take my kids to church. And as a teenage boy, when religion wasn't a part of our life, I wanted nothing to do with it. And Mom, to her credit, made us go to church and dragged us. We lived in Saginaw. She took us to a church in the inner city in a very bad part of town. I still remember. It was a Thursday night. It was one of those places where you feel unsafe getting out of your car at night. Where I grew up, you lock the doors at night. If you keep the bikes outside, they're going to be gone in the morning. It's that type. But this was even more kind of it was not fun to get out of the car. But Mom kept on making us go to church. Didn't resonate with me. I didn't understand why people were drawn to religion. It didn't seem like it had an appeal to me at that point. And I think I probably would have called myself an agnostic. I believe that there had to have been a God. I've heard people say before, for most of my life I was a lazy atheist, and I was a lazy agnostic growing up. I thought, okay, there had to be a God. There'd be something that created everything.
Yeah.
To me, it took more faith to believe that everything made itself. But certainly I thought there wasn't a God that actually cared about people. Certainly not my plight, because life was pretty rough growing up. And ultimately kept on having to go to church because my mom kept on making us. And there began to hear the pastor talk about Jesus, and Jesus was intriguing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so just decided to pull open the Bible in the pew in front of me because I had nothing else to do. And I went to the part that talked about Jesus, and there I saw the God of the universe come down to be with people, and Jesus came down to be with people like me and my family. I was a nobody from a family of nobodies,
Yeah.
and that's who Jesus spent his time with, the
Yeah.
outcasts,
Yeah.
the alcoholics, all of that. And I saw a God that wanted to have a personal relationship with me, that would die for me. And so I made that commitment to say, if there's a God, and that God loved me so much he would die for me, to be with me, then that is the most ultimate reality that deserves my everything. So
Yeah.
went into high school, gave my life to Christ, and God radically changed the trajectory of my life. And the first thing I knew was I knew I was going to go to law school. I knew I loved reading, I loved learning, and I was passionate about justice, particularly for people who are vulnerable, because that was the experience that I grew up with.
Right. That's amazing. Did you have the draw to law way before that? Like, was that cultivated at the same time of your coming to Christ, or was it? Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, interesting. Up to that point, my experience with the law was my family was on the other side of the law.
That's right.
So, yeah. Dad was in and out of prison.
Yeah.
Made the paper. It was, anyway. But the I had a passion for justice, and I didn't know how that would ultimately manifest itself. But it became clear to me that somehow going into high school, I was going to go to law school. Didn't know how I was going to get to college or law school. I didn't know how that was going to work out, but God ended up providing.
How do you feel like that changes how you practice your law and your counsel? Your story.
Yeah, it affects everything.
Yeah.
And primarily because, our profession in particular, but this is probably true in everyone. Our profession prides itself on being an identity, a defining marker of how we identify ourselves and lead with. I'm a lawyer. This is what I do. I take pride in that. And so I lead with that. For me, that was never my identity. It was just something that I felt called to do in furtherance of my ultimate identity. Was just, I was dead and now I'm alive, and God provided a path for me to just honor God and love people. And so for me, it was just a way to use what I thought were my passions, my giftings, and scale to love people and hopefully do it well.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
No, thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's a heck of a story. I think the thing that it's interesting because at some level, if someone looked at you today, not knowing that, they would never know. At some level, I'm not saying that in a way that, I'm sure you're willing to share that, but I think it's so powerful in that regard.
Well, I appreciate that. It reminds me actually back to, so I've served on the boards of Gospel Rescue Missions for the last 15 years, and Kalamazoo Gospel Mission, and then Mel Trotter Ministries for the last 13 years. And I remember being interviewed for the board of Mel Trotter 13, 14 years ago, and one of these longtime board members, I'm sitting in the governance committee being interviewed, and he was skeptical of me because I'm sitting there in a suit, and just very curious, and he asked me a question: why do you care about dirty homeless people? And that was his question, and I think he was trying to flesh out, why are you really here? Why, because from all practical purposes, you probably wouldn't know my background, and that the guests who walk in the mission feel like family because, but for God's grace, that's where I would be today.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
Yeah, amen.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And that further explains some of your desire for like that Thrive Project, some of those things where it's like, hey, we need to use business and use these connections to further reach out to these people that are just otherwise ignored,
Yeah, I love how you just said that last part, because that really is the heart of it, and I see it at times when I'm in rooms, when you're in the room of the people doing the things, and sometimes you'll get somebody who just has a different lived experience, but is in that room as well, and will just call out the fact that there's a whole voice here that's not being represented. And it could look
Yeah.
a lot of different ways, but
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes is Stephen Covey. We see the world as we are, not as the world is. We all just tend to do that. We only know our lived
Yeah.
experience, our lens,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so important to be proximate with people who have different lived experiences to broaden our perspectives and to offer representation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What are some other things that you're excited about in that same arena as Thrive?
I'm really excited right now about something I'm launching with some partners in the new year that I
Can you
can't-
talk about it?
I can't really talk about it. Although, I post on LinkedIn some pictures of some of the stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
We're working with Bill McKendry and his group to kind of talk about how do we launch this out there. But
He's always up to something,
Yeah.
Bill McKendry.
yeah, things that for Bill, a year ago we hosted him at a faith-driven entrepreneur, faith-driven investor gathering to have him tell a lot of the behind-the-scenes stories of the He Gets Us campaign,
Yeah.
and it was so fascinating. But I told him about a month or two ago about a passion of mine that looking to launch the new year that is built on enduring, timeless principles of things that last. And for me, it's what I build my life on, Jesus Christ. And so launching something that is distinct, that I think that is not really done out there, that will put a spotlight on Jesus for the world to see. And I asked him if he could just offer a little advice, and he just kind of, oh no, I need to help you with that. I'm going to be involved with that. And so I'm super excited, but super excited that I'm not doing it on my own, doing it with partners, doing it with outside parties. Finding the right who's, the who, not how, trying to find the people that can see that vision and help me as well. So super, super excited about the future and creating something that isn't about me, that's going to hopefully exist after I die.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing, Joshua.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I think one of the things I also want to talk about is like, what advice would you give to a founder that's like wanting to integrate more of their faith into their business? Maybe sometimes it's like you have someone start a business or someone that's been running a business that comes to the Lord, or they're new to their faith in that. Like, what are some of the examples that you see or advice that you give in that way?
Yeah. To start, I would say connect with Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. Faith-Driven Entrepreneur was started, it might be, less than a decade ago by Henry Kasner and Justin Foreman, and both of them have their extraordinary founder investor journeys in creating Faith-Driven Entrepreneur to be that gap, because they lived that lonely journey and figuring out, I think Henry particularly, because I think Henry, I don't know at what stage, maybe before or after his company went public, he became a believer through that process. And so working out your faith in a world where most of the world is secular, not necessarily going to encourage you how to live that faith out in an entrepreneurial world. So I've been extremely impressed with the ability to connect. And so, Justin and Henry, their tagline will be, come to our events for the content. It's great content, but stay for the community. Yeah. So come and get connected with community. And if that can't even be locally here, their foundation groups, they're phenomenal. And they'll connect you with people who are going through those things as well. And you could be in a group with somebody in Uganda, somebody all over the place, and they'll tell you exactly what they're going through, and it's encouragement. And now you've met a relationship that is there, that will be there to support you in your journey.
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge, that is such a huge piece of advice. I mean, there's no way that you can get some of that guidance other than that, right? And you talk about getting in a peer group as a business owner. Loneliness as a business owner is a very real thing, but then to get around people that actually have the same faith alignment as you, and that is huge,
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that are in the works, and as it pertains to faith-driven entrepreneur?
It's this last this last watch party, I think, just had over 300 different watch parties all over the world. It's just growing astronomically. And one of the things that we have locally here, Dana Ruffer is she's the head of Faith-Driven Entrepreneur for Teens, and so they're growing their reach at every stage. Our last gathering, October 14th, we did that in conjunction with Startup Garage, which Startup Garage working with the same ecosystem, just at the very ideation stage, which is so you talk about early entrepreneurship for teens, and then grow, and then on this it goes on the spectrum of the life of an entrepreneur. I think that there's continual momentum. It continues to grow, and there are other gear target towards working in the church, connecting pastors and churches with the entrepreneurs in the community, how to speak that language with them. So I think there's a huge gap there that they're trying to fill.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's great. Excited to see where that'll go. Maybe we'd chat again in like even just a year after you got that stuff all launched, and that'd be a cool conversation.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeshua. I appreciate you coming in, man.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks.